got a little job on the Clio to do today. Went for MOT and unfortunately failed on handbrake binding. I know some time ago handbrake came up a lot more than it should have done, so I tightened the handbrake cable so that it was acceptable. Obviously something's happened. I'm going to take a look inside the drums today on the rear and just see why it's binding. It's worse on the driver's side than the passenger. The first thing I'm going to do is adjust the handbrake and back it off. So car's in gear, handbrake's off. We need to release the centre console with these torques, one on this side and one on the other side, and then we'll come back. Okay, I've got those torques out. The centre console just has this little part which clips off underneath the handbrake. That just fits on there and just pops off. Then you can slide this back and just lift it up to remove. That exposes the handbrake adjuster, which, as we can see, the driver's side one is much looser than the other one, but that's the one that's binding. So I can see that there is play in that cable there, so it shouldn't be binding. It's not the lever that's causing it. So we'll go take the hubs off and have a look. But I will back that off first of all at 13mm. Just backed that off just so that there's definitely no tension on the cables from the handbrake lever. Just backed off all the wheel nuts with this while it's on the ground. Just makes them a bit easier to do than when it's in the air. An impact gun, obviously you could jack it up first and then use the impact gun. So on Amazon for about 40 quid now. I think I need to invest in one of those. These mats are what used to be underneath the hot tub. Stops your legs getting scraped off the pavement when you've got shorts on doing work. There's no ideal jacking points on this for when you're using a trolley jack. So I am using the manufacturer points. But obviously I'll try and get the stand underneath as quickly as I can. You can actually see these flex when you jack it up. Just going to place these stands underneath the rear beam section of the rear axle. I'm going to do both sides at the same time, so that's high enough so that I can take the wheels off and do what we need to do, and it'll be secure on two stands. Okay, both sides of the rear of the vehicle are supporting our axle stands, both back wheels on the ground and the handbrake's off. I'm going to remove the wheel. Just before I remove the wheel, the brake is definitely binding. You can actually hear it and you can feel it. That should turn without any resistance at all. The brakes are definitely binding, and this is the better side. I think it's a good while since these have seen any attention. Obviously lots of external rust on that. It's a good idea to clean it all up while it's in situ, just so it holds it while you clean it. I am going to get a wire brush on that, just clean off what I can do before I start taking things apart. Always put a mask on and always put eye protection on. You don't want a rust flake in your eye. Okay, we've removed the outside flaky rust off that. Just going to pop that cap off in the centre to get to the nut that holds the drum on and the hub. That cap just pops off and we've got a 30mm nut underneath it. On this car, the drum and the hub are one piece. You can't separate them. On some cars the drum will come off over the top of the hub, but not this one. So we're going to undo that nut and then we'll be able to take the drum off and have a look behind it. Okay, we've taken that centre nut out. You can just see the wheel bearing in there, which, as I say, is part of the hub. Just give it a knock a little bit, and then the hub should just pull off. I'm gonna have to use two hands for this, so I'll take it off and come back. Okay, so just by knocking all the debris out of that, you can see it spins much freer. So there's obviously something in it. It doesn't want to come off at the moment because there will be a lip on the inside of the drum, which is obviously catching on the brakes, on the pads inside, not letting it come off, so I'm going to need to pry it off. Let's just go and get some pry bars on there. Okay, so I'm just going to try pry bars on each different side of this. It does help if you can get them to go together or sort of wiggle them off, but it could be a long process, just gently. Bit of pressure later, and we can see that that's starting to come. And there we go. So there's lots and lots of brake dust in there that can get onto the surface of the brakes and onto the drum. You can see got all that dust in there, and that's what's causing the brakes to jam up. So we'll get that cleaned up with brake cleaner and then come back. You definitely do need a mask on to do this. The drum looks okay inside, it's not scored or anything, but there is a lip there, very slight on the edge. So I'm just going to give that a quick sand before I clean it with brake clean. Okay, that's the drum cleaned out as well. Gone around the edge of the lip, just sanded that down a bit. Brake cleaner, make sure it's all clean inside. Just going to put a tiny amount of grease back on that stub, just to make sure that it's all clean. Make sure there's no dust or grit on that as well before you put the drum back on. Put a tiny amount of grease on that stub. All this is clean as it needs to be, and the drum is as clean as it needs to be. So we'll get that put back on. Get that centre nut put back on. I am going to get a new nut for this. You should always use new nuts on this. They are nylock and only to be designed to be used once. I don't have one at the moment, so I will be replacing this with a new one. This isn't like a wheel bearing that's tapered, where you have to adjust the tightness to make the bearing effective. This one purely presses against the shaft and holds a roller bearing in there. So this does need to be tight, and it shouldn't stop the wheel turning or put any tension on it. Okay, that's now tight, and we can see that that's much freer than it was when we started. I am going to use the bar to tighten that up to tight. Pop the cap back on. You have to get these square when you first line them up. Okay, passenger side is finished. Sorry, last part of it, passenger side can see it's much freer and it's not binding at all. Just while we've got the wheel off and we can see things, that brake pipe, although I wouldn't say it was corroded or dangerous, it is showing some signs of rust where the paint's come off, sort of all along the hard line. I'm just going to wire brush that back and put a bit of grease on it just to stop it corroding any further. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. There is a lot of external rust on it. Quite a lot of rust on this car, considering its age. 2014, but it looks much worse. Just take off what we can't see, make sure we don't have anything else, and again, wear a mask doing this, and wear goggles doing this. You can see the rust coming off it. You don't want to get any of that in your eyes or anywhere else. Oh, it looks very bad, that rust coming off it. Still, it is only sort of surface rust. That rub is still serviceable. Yeah, it's bad this side. Side will have been heating up as well, which makes that rust, although it looks really thick, it actually isn't. It's the actual rust that's expanded. So we'll just take all of that off. Okay, that's looking much better now. Take the cap off. Actually freed off now just by knocking it, so we've just knocked all the dust and debris out of where it was settling. Cap off, big bar. This is actually the side that I did a wheel bearing on about a year ago. In the space of a year, the dust that's accumulated managed to completely bind up the brake. Okay, let's see how easy or not this one's going to come off. So again, the components look okay. Just done a quick inspection. Pads are thinner on this side, but obviously that has been binding. Might account for that. Lots and lots of dust in the drum. Yeah. Let's get rid of that. And we'll do the same thing with this one, give it a clean up, pop it back together, and then see how it goes. Just gonna sand this lip. Give that a wipe out. This black ring is actually the ABS ring. You need to be a bit careful with that and make sure you don't knock it or disturb it too much. Give this a wipe and a rinse. Okay, same as before, we've put a bit of grease on the stub axle there. And let's pop that back on. Pads on this side were a bit thin, so I am going to order new pads with that handbrake cable, which we can put on when they arrive or at a later date. Get it through the MOT for now, and then we can worry about that. Okay, so that's tight with that. Let's just tighten it with the bar just to make sure. Tight. Absolutely no friction that side either, that's good. I'm going to pop the wheels back on, leave it in the air for now, and then adjust the handbrake up. Okay, so tighten the handbrake up so that there's no tension on it, but it's got acceptable travel. Passenger side wheel spinning freely. Driver's side is, yeah, spinning freely now. I'm going to try just loosening that off a bit and see if the speed spins a bit freer. So we clean this all up, put it back together, and it was fine. Applied the brake once and then it stuck again. Taken the pads off here entirely to clean the back plate up properly. First I thought they may not be sliding too well on the bottom parts, or where the pins come through and join onto them. But turns out it was the handbrake lever which was stuck solid, so it stayed on as soon as you pulled it, and that's what our issue was. I've released that off now, bit of WD-40, just going to rebuild it. Day 2 on the Clio brakes. Decided to do what I should have in the first place and buy new brakes. I've managed to get a handbrake cable today, so we're doing it all properly. I've stripped all the old brakes off and cleaned up these areas with a wire brush, just where the brake pads touch the surface. Have got a new handbrake cable, as I say. I've taken that off out the hole. Brackets come away from the car there. I'll find somewhere to put it back on. But inside the car, I can't really see much from underneath because I've not particularly got it high. Pretty sure it just comes in here and pokes through, so I'm just going to tie some cable onto that while I pull it back through. Hopefully I can pull the new one through with that. Right, I'm tied on there. I'll go underneath and pull it through. Hopefully there's no other clips or anything on that. Not much room under here, but you can see handbrake cable is there. Might go from the other side actually. See if I can see where that's going a bit better. Okay, so there is just one more plastic clip holding it in, just behind the yellow one. You can see the one that we need to undo. You can actually see it better from the back. This is the clip that we need to get the cable out of and where we need to feed the new one into. You can see the cable is shorter, so the old one has stretched. I'm going to tie the new cable to the wire, feed it through the clip and tie wrap it in, because obviously that's broke as well. That's the new handbrake cable in. I'm just going to give it a clean up and assemble the new pads with the fitting kit, shoes, sorry. Okay, I've got this side assembled, everything's normal, looking good. I've put sort of a tiny bit of grease on the stub axle. Just cleaned the drum out, just going to give it a spray and put it back on. One thing I didn't do was adjust the adjuster. Just tried to put the drum on, not enough room because obviously there's more thickness on these pads than there were on the old ones. So I'm going to have to back that adjuster off, lift the little lever behind it and turn that little wheel. Same again on this side. Just put a new wheel cylinder on this side. This is the one that was frozen, so that side of it wasn't operating at all. I cleaned up all those areas that the pads are going to run on, so I'll put a bit of copper grease on those spots, a bit of grease on the stub axle, and then put it back together. This time I have wound the brake adjuster back in, so that should make it easier for the drum to go on. That's the other side together, all shiny new parts, all cleaned off, all ready to go back together. Just going to do the same thing again, wire wheel the drum inside and give it a spray and pop it on.